Good evening, everyone. It's great to see everybody here. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Jenny Sinclair, and I'm Director of Together for the Common Good. A very warm welcome to St Mary's Church, Putney. We're really grateful to the community here for welcoming us and for hosting this event. This is actually where the 1647 Putney debates took place. Right here, people discussed establishing the principle of votes for all right here where we are tonight. So over 300 years later, we're going to look at our relationship with the state. And this is our second debate in our series, State, Society and the Common Good. And this series is happening thanks to a partnership between us and three other organisations. So the four organisations you can see here: Theos, the think tank, a great team of very clever people who stimulate public thinking about the place of religion in society through research, commentary and events. And the Benedict XVI Centre from St Mary's University, Twickenham, and they contribute to academic, ecclesial and public debates about the place of religion in society. And CCLA, who are supporting the filming of tonight's discussion and the reception afterwards. And CCLA is one of the UK's leading ethical fund managers, handling investments for over 40,000 charities, churches and public sector clients. And they're the largest manager of socially responsible funds in the UK and provide the secretariat to the influential Church Investors Group. And my own organisation, Together for the Common Good, we are a network of people dedicated to bringing the common good alive and working together to strengthen civil society. So all four of us have come together to bring you this series. And strengthening institutions and building links between them is a really vital part of building the common good, just as we're doing tonight. In fact, equally your participation here tonight, your different organisations that you're representing, your different views, opinions and backgrounds, traditions, your interaction with each other will generate a common good tonight as well. So the common good is often misunderstood. It's not, as often thought, a utopian ideal. It's not party political. It's actually messier and more beautifully human than any utopian ideal could be. And it's about the shared life of society as we work together across our differences and creating the conditions in which every human person can flourish. It's about strengthening our civil society institutions, families and communities, particularly to resist the sometimes dehumanizing forces of both the over-centralized state and big business. So the common good is generated by us as we take responsibility, each of us, according to our vocation and ability. And it's not by definition something that government can impose top-down. However, actions by the state can enable the conditions in which the common good can thrive, but they can also undermine it. So we look forward to unpacking what that looks like in relation to the family tonight. Now you'll find a postcard on your seat or somewhere near to your seat. And we just put that there in case during the debate something comes to mind that you think personally in your role, your vocation, something that you can do. And we just suggest you note that down and take it home as a reminder. And the Twitter hashtag for tonight is Family Common Good, or one word, Family Common Good. So I'm delighted to hand over to Elizabeth Oldfield, our chair for this evening. So as well as being director of Theos, Liz is an experienced broadcaster, so we're in very safe hands. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, I'll just move this a bit closer because there's a lot of space to fill in here. We're here tonight to talk about a subject that all of us will have some experience of, some positive and some negative. It is a policy area and yet deeply human and personal. We want to discuss the common good in relationship to families. What can and should we expect of families? Which responsibility should they carry and where should the state step in? And how do we get the right balance there to maximize human flourishing? And I should say at the beginning here that discussing the family in public debates can be challenging, can even be painful. And I think that's because for some people, if you're not married in a heterosexual couple with 2.4 biological children, the concept can seem excluding, even outdated. And most of you are here because you are comfortable about talking about family in those terms, but I do want to say right at the start that we don't necessarily mean that unhelpfully narrow definition of family. But we do want to put front and center in human flourishing the importance of family. And by that, you can read, if you prefer, small kinship-based groups of lifelong commitment. We think that these groups sit between the individual, the state, and the market. They are a fact of almost everyone's lives, and their role in well-being and our common good is too rarely discussed. And the relationship between the state and the family in particular has been changing over recent years. Symptoms can be seen in a range of quite spiky public policy controversies, from the Scottish named person scheme to the regulation of homeschooling, the increasing regulation of homeschooling, to the 2-child limit on benefits, to arguments over the rights of parents to have a say in how their children are educated in matters of sex education. And for some, this is a cause for anxiety. They see the natural rights of the family being undermined. And others delight in what they see as policy becoming more progressive. Whatever you think, over time, a significant shift is happening with both cultural and structural factors. Successive governments have created a tax and welfare system primarily based on individuals, and many see this as discouraging family formation. And connected with these trends is a decline in what many call the traditional family, as well as people living close to their extended family. Rough sleepers frequently cite family breakdown as a cause of homelessness, while we know that the young as well as the old are suffering sharp rises in levels of loneliness. Alongside this, childcare and care for the elderly is being increasingly delivered outside the home by professionals rather than by family members. So should the state simply step up its responsibility in the face of these changes and these challenges? Some would argue that the state is incapable of replacing the fundamentally human and relational functions of the family. Others contend that particularly for the welfare of vulnerable children, it's vital that state actors do so, that they are the only realistic option in the face of dire need. At the heart of our debate, we will consider the role that churches, other faith communities, and civil society groups can do and might play to better support children and families. In an era where family life is under strain from multiple pressures, it may be that local and personal and civil society solutions will prove not only to be vital, but also central to what we need to do. So I'm delighted to welcome our panel tonight. I'll introduce them really briefly because in the age of the internet, you can read all about them online. And it's always awkward listening to a long list of your achievements. Just trust me, these guys have many. Philip Booth is going to begin. He is Professor of Finance, Public Policy and Ethics at St Mary's University, Twickenham. We've then got Cathy Corcoran, OBE, who was Chief Executive of the Cardinal Hume Centre from 2003 to 2018. And if you haven't come across it, it's an amazing central London charity helping people to overcome poverty and homelessness. On my left, we have, this is not a debating situation, by the way, we're not going to make these guys go head to head yet. We have Mark Molden, who is Chief Executive of the charity Marriage Care, which is a major charity supporting marriages and families more generally. And on the end, we have Professor Sir Al Green, who has served as Children's Commissioner for England and is an authority on children's services, child health and childhood, and the author of The British Betrayal of Childhood, which is very recently published. I'm really grateful for all four of them for coming tonight. I'm really fascinated about what they're going to say. I have asked them to keep very strictly to an 8-minute limit, and I'm going to have a timer running that they can see. And I will very publicly lean over and put my hand up at 8 minutes in the hope that the sort of very gentle nudge of social shame will help us keep to time. Thank you very much, and I'm going to hand over to Philip Booth at the end.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about fiscal policy, welfare policy, and government policy towards taxation and its relationship with the family. And normally this is viewed through a lens of how the government might do more things by expanding welfare, providing more childcare provision and this type of thing in order to aid families. And I think that's a rather reductionist way to think about things. Taxation currently is at its highest level, well, more or less since the Second World War, more or less actually in peacetime history. As recently as 2010, government spending was over half of national income. Now it's about 45% of national income. And I think there's a big question as to how problems one might see in society can be solved simply by more of that same approach. And indeed, I think government attempts, because they're very often well-meaning, things like universal credit, to resolve these problems, welfare policies often have precisely the opposite of precisely the opposite effect of their original intentions. Universal credit is a very good example of how to not solve poverty incredibly expensively. Now, until the outbreak of the First World War, the state was so little involved in economic and social life that the idea of family policy would never really have arisen. Of course, the fundamental functions of the state, protecting property, defence, law and order, this type of thing, are fundamental for civil society and the family to thrive. But there was no such thing as family policy as such. But as the state became more involved in economic life, and especially after the Second World War, when the welfare state took a large leap to become much larger and more significant, it did so in a way such that the family, rather than the individual, was the basis of almost all public policy. And it was very clear that this was Beveridge's intention as well. And this should be important to Christians, indeed all people of goodwill, as Elizabeth has pointed out. The family is the earliest and most direct vehicle for socialization, for cooperation, for sharing, for mutual reliance, and so on. It's the basic unit within society in which we share goods, distribute income, and experience what economists would call the division of labor. So whether you think of children or pensioners, elderly relatives in need of care, the two primary adults in a family, they all do different things in a family. They all earn different amounts of money, some of them zero, and they then share incomes in the pursuit of the common goal of ensuring that the family flourishes. Indeed, you could say that they distribute resources, giving according to need and taking away according to the ability to pay. You could say it's a little unit of communism, if you like, and in that sense you could argue that political communism is a heresy in the proper sense of a truth taken out of context, but because it's an attempt to try to apply to the country as a whole something where the natural domain is the family. Now, unfortunately, public policy since really the 1960s, probably the 1970s, has come to begin to discriminate against family formation and to do so quite decisively. And this has been a move which has been promoted by all political parties and all philosophies. So, for example, this is Harriet Harman and Patricia Hewitt writing in a book for the IPPR in 1990. They argue that the traditional ways of thinking about the family thwart the ability of women alone to provide adequately for themselves and their children. Hewitt was Minister for Women and Harman Secretary of State for Work and Pensions in the Blair government. But it was the Conservative Party, of course, that chose to remove the family basis for taxation in the late 1980s. And in doing so, Nigel Lawson was cheered on by well-off Tory women activists. I remember seeing it on telly, actually. People who would cross go to the other side of the road to avoid passing Harriet Harman on the pavement. And it's true also that people of the philosophically, people of the left have essentially joined with individualistic libertarians in promoting the idea that the basic unit of organisation within society is the individual and not the family. And those particular reforms that have taken place since the 1980s have led family formation to be discriminated against very strongly within the tax and welfare system taken together. So the combination of levying tax on an individual basis and providing welfare benefits on the basis of family income leads to family formation being discriminated against financially, and in a significant way, and especially for the least well-off. So if two adults, for example, let's say a mother and father who previously lived apart, move into the same home together, one of them is earning $25,000 a year and the other $11,000 a year, not an untypical situation, There's no change at all in their tax bill, actually a tiny change because of the small transferable allowance, but a significant reduction in the amount of benefits that they receive. Other parts of the tax system, such as the withdrawal of benefits, stamp duty on second homes, doesn't affect that many people, but both of those things discriminate strongly against family formation. So, Nick Clegg once told us that he opposed the introduction of transferable tax allowances, which is something that Nigel Lawson actually wanted to bring in when tax was individualised, onto an individualised basis, but Mrs. Thatcher stopped him, and Nigel Lawson is today a very strong proponent of transferable allowances. Nick Clegg argued that we shouldn't have transferable tax allowances, we shouldn't have a family basis for taxation because we shouldn't discriminate in favour of certain types of family organisation. This misses the point entirely. The government taxation and fiscal policy discriminate strongly against family formation, as if somehow family formation is a bad thing and it needs to be penalised or discouraged in some way. And we're quite unusual in the UK in taking that approach. Nearly all developed countries in some way have a tax and a welfare system which operate on a consistent basis normally by levying tax on the basis of family income rather than individual income, and do so in a way that discriminates much less against family formation than our own system. So the purpose of the state is to serve the family and not the other way around. I may have some things to say about things like named person and all the rest of it if that comes up. And because there are other respects in which I think this relationship has become inverted. But the purpose of the state when it comes to fiscal policy should be to have an approach to fiscal policy which allows the family to thrive and not to penalise it. It's my strong belief, it would have been Beveridge's strong belief, and I think it should be the strong belief of all Christians and people of goodwill, whatever your view about the sort of issues which Elizabeth mentioned at the beginning about how we define family life and so on, that tax and welfare policy should be rebalanced to ensure that that primary vehicle for welfare, which is the family, is supported rather than penalised through the fiscal system.
Thank you very much. 18 seconds to go. Top prize.
You want me to use them up?
No, thank you. I'm going to hand over straight away to Kathy.
Can you hear me? Good. Firstly, it's a real privilege to be asked to contribute tonight. On the way here, I was thinking about my motivation in accepting, as being on show and being filmed and potentially being asked questions I can't answer is not something I normally seek. However, the years of witnessing poverty, exclusion, and their impact on human beings, homelessness, family breakdown, mental illness, impel me to speak out, to share the truth of the lives of the people I have met. Each of us will have started our preparation today by identifying what we mean by family. It's not in my brief to challenge or authenticate the view of a traditional or normal family. I would normally use the word with a pretty wide interpretation as a recognizable unit which nurtures, cherishes, supports, struggles together, is sometimes part of the problem, not the solution, or all or none of these things. That's not very helpful, though, in the light of tonight's discussion. So I'll be using the term to describe a family unit of 1 or 2 adults with children, potentially extended members. My other choice is not to speak of the state in the abstract, but probably more of government policy within the current political reality. 2 basic premises. Firstly, I stand by the fact that the welfare state was established to provide a safety net for those people in our society who are the most vulnerable for whatever reason. I do not think that it's an out-of-date concept. The safety net is being removed under various headings: welfare reform, austerity, as well, of course, as affordability, of making work pay, when today 2/3 of the people receiving benefits are in working households. Which leads to my second premise. There has been a deliberateness, some go as far as saying cruelty, about the austerity agenda, and I think it is an agenda, which is about making those who are least able to afford it to pay for the country's deficit, for which they have not been responsible. Mention has been made recently of austerity being over, I wish. Even if it were, it has ruined so many families' lives, and that can never be put right, especially for the children who have been robbed of their childhood. And there are no quick fixes for this kind of damage. So let's look at some of the specifics, just snapshots of the state's most recent negative interactions with the family welfare reform. Anyone who, with any knowledge of how the system worked in practice, welcomed the idea of reform, streamlining bureaucracy, introducing consistency in application of criteria, making the system more accessible for the most vulnerable people. What we didn't advocate for was benefit caps being imposed, leading to families being moved away from their support network, children's schools, workplaces. There has been an increase of over 50% in the number of families being arbitrarily moved out of London in the first 6 months of this year alone. That's well over 1,000 families. Of the withdrawal of education support allowance from young people who now have no other means, much more. Universal credit, as Philip has inferred, again, we welcomed it. We welcomed the rationalising of an utterly complex benefit system. The reality is that it is paid in arrears, with the first payment taking at least 6 weeks, often leaving people penniless and forced into unpayable debt, as well as requiring, to be honest, a degree-level knowledge to fill in the application form. Imposing sanctions. If you are late or fail to attend an appointment at the Job Centre Plus for whatever reason, your benefits to which you are entitled are withdrawn. We employed an advice worker at the Cardinal Hume Centre who had previously worked at Job Centre Plus. She told us of the weekly target the staff were given to impose sanctions regardless of the circumstances. The housing market, ludicrously low levels year on year of investment in affordable housing, failure to introduce rent regulation, leading to increased homelessness and more families being placed in temporary accommodation. Tonight, some 120,000 children will be sleeping in accommodation that is quite frankly bad for their health and their development, and they're by no means the only ones that the others are probably not on anybody else's radar. The withdrawal of public services across the board has led to lots of things, but the one I'm concerned about often is the advice desert, where there is nowhere that anyone can go for informed, objective information and advice, not to mention support. The withdrawal of legal aid for a whole range of issues, including family law and social welfare cases, which have dropped, by the way, respectively 60% and 80% in take-up, so people are not able to go to court. So although you have rights, you do not have the means to ensure they are respected. None of this makes any kind of economic sense. Intervention to prevent a crisis is always more cost-effective than responding to that crisis. And moving on today to his theme, I'm sure Al will develop this further, I believe what we're witnessing is the state's deprioritisation of children and young people, with the consequence that they in turn are going to struggle to establish a family life, which should surely frighten us for the future, if not the now, which, as I said, I'm sure Al will develop that. I believe the common good, as we understand it, is under attack as the degree of inequity in our country increases. Currently, 20%, 1 in 5 of us, is officially living in poverty in the UK. That includes 4 million children. Is it all doom and gloom? Well, for many people, yes, it is, frankly, and they can see no way out. However, for those of us who have resources, who can make choices, who should be able to make ourselves heard, who are formed by Catholic social teaching, doing nothing is a cop-out. And telling ourselves that there is nothing we can do is frankly an excuse. If you take the work of the churches and faith-founded organisations, charities, out of the equation, the picture would be immensely sadder and more tragic for thousands of people. I had a whole list of what the churches do. I'll now cut that short, but it is pretty impressive. And one of the 2 important things is the advocating for change, which happens behind closed doors, and challenging the poverty myths which abound. And that, for me, is the hope factor, that the churches, like-minded others, can also, alongside that practical support, call it out for what it is, name it, the injustice, the cruelty, the opportunity denying, the life-debasing reality for so many of our fellow travellers. Poverty is caused by the ways we choose how we exist in society, so it can be ended if we make different choices. All in all, I believe we are being called upon to be ambassadors of hope in these fairly desperate times, nationally and internationally. So can it get better? Yes, of course it can. With the political will, with imagination, with commitment. It will take time, as it means the eradication of our ingrained habit of treating people differently, of believing there is an inevitability about poverty, and of finding it acceptable that millions of people count for less, matter less, deserve less, and even need less in order to flourish. Thank you.
Thank you. And straight over to Mark.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your introduction, and thanks again to the organisers for their kind invitation. Unlike my esteemed colleagues on the panel, my credibility as a contributor is limited, save that of the wonderful organisation that I represent. Marriage Care is a national Catholic charity that's really been defined by a movement of thousands of professionally trained volunteers who over the past 72 years have been committed to delivering marriage and relationship education and support. They have put common good thinking into practice, making a real contribution to the good of society. So alongside marriage preparation, we provide the second largest relationship counselling service in England and Wales, and we reach proportionately more clients facing the stresses of poverty and low incomes than any other in our sector. Like all charities, we exist to serve the needs of our beneficiaries, and as a Catholic charity, we do so through the lens of our faith, illuminating the Christian belief that all human beings are loved by God and made in the image of God, and that the locus of human flourishing is our ability to respond to the divine impulse to love and to be loved. We believe that healthy marriages and relationships make for better lives and a stronger society. We believe that preventing couples separation and maintaining an intact family where healthy relationships can exist and grow in goodness is of fundamental importance to the flourishing of family life. We believe that supporting couple relationships is a matter of social justice, holding back the inequalities and injustice that can arise from family breakdown. So as we explore the question of expectations and responsibilities on the family and the state, I want to draw our attention to two things in particular that I think are overlooked by Catholic social teaching and our broader. So the first of these is how's that? Is that better? The significant but little understood role of the couple relationship. And the second thing I want to explore is the impact of relationship poverty, that like material poverty can exclude those affected from full participation in the life of our community. Catholic social teaching suggests that the human race is a community of communities, the smallest community being the individual family, the basic cell of human society. CST postures that a well-constructed society will be one that gives priority to the integrity, the stability, the health of family life. We all know that families come in all shapes and sizes, but at the root of all our various family types is an intimate adult partnership, the couple relationship. Married or not, together or apart, known or unknown, healthy or unhealthy, fleeting or permanent. That can be an uncomfortable fact and a deeply painful reality for some, but to avoid or airbrush out a couple relationships from the debate about family life overlooks, I think, a foundational opportunity to build the common good. Family life exists for better or for worse because of the couple relationship, and I would suggest that the shared life of a society in which everyone can flourish will be one that gives priority to the integrity, stability, and health of the couple relationship as the basic cell of human society, not at the expense or denial of other family or social relationships, but perhaps as a first among equals, not a silent partner in our reflections. Few would dispute the suggestion that the quality of our closest relationship profoundly affects how we feel about ourselves. Good relationships and social connections keep us happier and healthier. Much less widely acknowledged, however, although just as true, is the fact that the quality of our intimate adult partnerships, our couple relationships, has material and measurable consequences for our lives and those around us, affecting the emotional, cognitive, physical development of our children, our capacity to work and to be fulfilled in work, our physical and mental health as we get older. In a Harvard study of adult development, the people who were most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. The quality of our couple relationships affect other health factors too, such as how much alcohol we drink, whether or not we have high blood pressure, our mental health. People with stronger relationships are 50% more likely to survive a life-threatening illness than those whose relationships are weaker. So if we're serious about the common good, then we must recognize that good quality marriages and relationships have material consequences for all of us. Couple relationships hold an important key to building social capital, so the concept of relationship poverty also needs our attention. It can be defined as the lack of relationship capability, the skills and circumstances needed to form and sustain cohesive and harmonious relationship. There's an unequivocal association between relationship breakdown and general adult ill health, and this association extends to poor child outcomes. Today, nearly 3 million people are in distressed relationships. In a survey of over 4,500 children seen by CAMHS, family relationship problems were by far the biggest factor in their mental health. Relationship poverty is a barrier to the common good and is both the driver of material poverty and the consequence of it. So how can the state help? What responsibilities does it have here? Well, I think the state needs to keep a healthy distance. The bedroom tax could take on a whole new meaning if couple counselling was delivered directly by the state. But the state does have the role, and given the overwhelming evidence, has a duty to encourage healthy relationship formation and development in children and adults. It was Clement Attlee's government that first recognised the state's responsibility to support couple relationships, but to do so through organisations like Marriage Care, who had the social capital and community trust to enter this private relational space. The economic case is clear. The cost of family breakdown to the UK is estimated at 51 billion per year. The public health case is clear too. Couple relationships have a bearing on the vast majority of public health outcome framework indicators, so there is a clear mandate for a long-term public health campaign, as we've seen for seatbelts, smoking, healthy eating. We can make significant improvements in public health by placing couple relationships centre stage. The government is to be commended for its proposals to roll out relationship education in schools, but this needs to be reinforced in adulthood. The Catholic Church offers a leading example here. It invites couples that have chosen to marry in church to undergo pre-marriage preparation using proven relationship education courses. A public health campaign could not only inform the public about healthy relationships, but normalise the need for support and education and encourage take-up at key points of transition, like moving in together or having a baby. Relationships are messy and they're complicated, and the hard work of tending to enduring love is not glamorous, but it's a living model of the common good, to be found in the shared life represented by a healthy couple relationship where each partner, each spouse acts together in different ways that all contribute to the goal of a secure, loving relationship. Someone said, to be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It's what we need more than anything. I believe the shared life of a society in which everyone can flourish will be one that gives priority to the integrity, the stability, the health of the couple relationship, and the alleviation and prevention of relationship poverty. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'm Al. Can you hear me? And please call me Al. And I'm changing gear. I want to put the child at the centre of my presentation. That was my remit as the first Children's Commissioner for England.
Just hold it a bit close to your mouth.
Closer? Is that better? As the first Children's Commissioner for England to speak for the best interests of 11 million children of England. And so I want to set the scene by showing you the cover of yesterday's Daily Mirror. Here is a whole page with the title, Mummy died, Daddy has lost his job, can I get work sweeping the floor? And this story is a microcosm of what has happened to children across the whole country. A grieving 9-year-old child. What is government doing for widows' benefits? Streamlining them to encourage widows to go back to work and to remarry. What's it doing for the pernicious influence of universal credit? As this family, dad is out of job and he's waiting for his first benefits to come in, creating no food for the child in its home. The child crying out for help. Are you comfortable with this portrayal of childhood today? So let me further set the scene by showing you this. This is who we're talking about. You may not see it very easily, and I don't have a slide, but it is a beautiful, human, newly born citizen. She's only a few hours old, but she's demonstrating an amazing ability to manipulate her parents by the eyeball-to-eyeball gaze, which we know is the key biological trigger for attachment. We don't abandon our babies, we nurture them. And the trigger for this is this eyeball-to-eyeball concentration. So 2 questions immediately. Why should we care about children? And secondly, what are their needs? So why should we care about children? Sisyphus had it easy in pushing his boulder up the hill compared today for us to get political traction for the importance of children in our society. We have to make sure that children are seen to be important. Now, through the economic, fiscal lens, children must be important because of the old age dependency ratio. We're experiencing a massive increase in older people living longer. So who is going to provide the country's wealth to support those people? The children today. So what do children need? They need to be healthy, educated, creative, resilient, and happy with the life skills to thrive as successful adults and parents of the future. That's the economic argument. But there's a moral argument. What about those children who can't become parents or economic assets, those with disability or disadvantage? Surely, as a compassionate, caring society, we must make sure that every child has the best opportunities to thrive to his or her potential. So, what does this little baby mean? And by the way, this is the most beautiful baby in the world. I know that because she's my granddaughter. Now you laugh, my friends, but you care about the children in your family as much as I do for the children in my family. So why don't we as a society care more about the children of others, especially those who are in any way different or troubled or troublesome? So, what does a child need? I offer you the African proverb. It takes a whole village to raise a child. And let me explore this. And by the way, all of this is supported by a wonderful book that's just been published. And here it is. It's wonderful because I wrote it. It was published 2 weeks ago. There's some order forms here for you. And it sets out a forensic analysis of childhood today, looking at policies and practices, celebrating what's good, but putting no punches on what isn't, especially political attitude to the importance of children compared with what I've seen in Finland, in Holland, in Spain, and Canada, where these countries are on a different planet in terms of how they see children in society. So, it takes a whole village to raise a child. What does that mean? It means the nurture of children should be everybody's business, especially in local communities. Parents and parenting's vitally important, yet we're not investing nearly enough in preparing young people to become parents. Families matter, and of course there are different structures to families, but what children tell me as commissioner, families matter to me. They matter because they provide love and they provide security for me to thrive as an individual. So parents and families are important, but it's the local community that should also be relevant. Play. And look what's happening to our policies for play today. They're non-existent. Yet play is how the child understands the world. Faiths, crucially important, because faiths give purpose in life and address the uncertainties of the hereafter, etc. So what are faiths doing? support children and to support communities through their parishes. Very patchy, I can tell you. Some parishes are doing a really great job in supporting local families and children. Others, not on the plot at all. So faiths are important, all faiths, not just the Christian faith, but Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, etc. They've all got their values which children need to have. And then there is government. Local government, very important, and of course, national government, who has taxes to produce the revenues for investment. So I offer you the construct. It takes a whole village to raise a child. What are we going to do? What are you going to do in your community to promote this? Because it is sadly needed at the present. I just want to come back finally to where I started, which is grief. My dad died suddenly when I was 10. He left my mum in a disastrous financial situation, dependent on benefits, me on free school meals. I got to grammar school, determined to be a doctor, where the teacher said you could do it, and the rest is history. I am one of only 4% of doctors who comes from a disadvantaged background. So grief is important. Policies need to be tailored to the needs of families suffering grief, and we need to be much more compassionate in the context of our Treasury's policies for fiscal probity. Children matter. Children are at the heart of everything. They're our future. Why do we not have policies designated, directed to further their best interests? And I'd be pleased to have your comments. Thank you.
Could we give our panelists a round of applause?